Amen. Hey, those of you online, thank you for joining us today, too. We are so glad that you've chosen to do that. Some of you planned to be in the room, but you ended up online. We're glad for that. In fact, why don't we have everybody in the room say good morning to all those joining us online? You ready? 1, 2, 3. Good morning. Good job. Glad you're here today. All I can say is that I must have been insane because a little over 24 hours ago, let's put it this way. When I got home, by the time I got home yesterday, I thought, this is nuts. This is just absolutely nuts. I left the place where I was staying in Brazil on Friday afternoon, okay? And then I took a bus to Sao Paulo, which is the 5th largest city in the world. Can you imagine trying to get into it with a bus? Got to the airport, got on my plane. The plane finally left at whatever time, flew all night long, ended up in Chicago, which is the 4th largest city in the U.S., not a real easy airport to get around in. Get through, I had to make connections, got to get through customs, got to get through, I finally got and then I got to Tulsa. But then I got off of Tulsa, then I had to get by the time I got home, it had been 22 and a half hours since I left where I was staying. And it's just like, it's crazy. In fact, good morning, Mom and Dad, haven't seen you. Good to see you. By the way, I got back, okay, just in case I didn't tell you. Crazy. I mean, it's just, all that, and please understand, I'm not telling you about that to impress you or make you think anything about me. In fact, all I wanted to do is warn you. You might not understand the words that are coming out of my mouth. I mean, because it's one of those times that my brain is somewhere, anyhow. Today, though, we're returning to this series we've been in that I've called In Times Like These, that seems even more appropriate right now with all that's happened in Caney in the last week. We've been looking at the unique challenges of being a Christian in times like these and in a culture like ours. The challenge is, how do we stand firm in our faith without caving to the pressures of this anti-Christian culture? And how do we do that while at the same time loving people so well that we don't alienate them, rather we're able to reach them? How do we do that? How do we do that? Now, to answer that, we've been looking at this man in the Bible named Daniel, and who managed to somehow navigate that challenge. And we've been looking at the book that bears his name, that not only tells the story of how he navigated it, but I believe also gives us a playbook for how we can navigate it. The backstory, again, is that Daniel was of the nation of Israel, and the nation of Israel had rejected God. Can you imagine that? A nation rejecting God. Consequence of that rejection, though, is God says, okay, hands off, you guys, you can have your way. And that way ended up having them oppressed, literally attacked by another country, defeated as a nation, and people taken off as captives to that other nation. And among the captives that got relocated to Babylon, the nation that took them over, among those captives taken was Daniel, as well as his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, better known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Okay, so the book of Daniel contains the account of the challenges they faced trying to live in a place that was not their place, in a culture that was anything like what they remembered growing up with, that valued things they didn't value, that wanted things they didn't want, and was pushing those things on them. How did they navigate those challenges without bowing to the temptations of that very ungodly culture, and yet have incredible influence on that culture? Let's do a real quick review. We start in chapter 1, and we looked at what we called the identity challenge. Daniel was about 16 years of age. Which one of you guys is about 16? Any of you? Okay. No, Erica, not even close. Reverse the numbers, and you're still not there. One of you guys is getting close to 16, right? That's what I thought. You guys are close, right? You're 15, 16? Yeah, you'll go with that. Anyhow, about like these guys down here. That was chapter 1. And we found that they were challenged because the first thing the Babylonians tried to do was rename them and to change their identity. And we learned the culture's greatest goal is to change your identity, to get you to believe something about yourself, believe something about your God, and about his desire for you that's just not true. And so we said the question that we had then was, will I change with my identity, according to what culture wants? Will I let culture change it? Or will I challenge culture and change culture? Then we looked at chapter 2, what we called the relevance challenge. And we said Daniel was close to 20. Do I even dare say anybody here close to 20? Because, okay, you guys are. Yeah, raise your hand for me real quick. These guys, you too. You're in your 20s, aren't you? You are in your 20s now, aren't you? Okay. Hey, 20-year-old, what do you expect, okay? What? Chapter 2, they're about this age, okay? Chapter 1 about this age, chapter 2 about that age. And we said there was what we call the relevance challenge, and that culture's greatest ploy, which was revealed in that chapter, greatest ploy is to marginalize your faith. It wants you to just minimize God's wisdom and God's ways in your life so that it can push you and your faith to the side of culture. But we learn from Daniel is that we can overcome the inevitable chaos of a culture in rebellion to God if we know God's in control, that he's made us for this moment in this season of life, and speak into that season, speak into that life. Then we looked at chapter 3, the worship challenge. That was the last time I was here. Daniel was about his mid-30s about that time, and back here, you guys, Dalton, you stood last week. Raise your hand. So Dalton, we got Dalton, and over here, Ori's, he's in his 30s, something like that. Anyhow, sometimes I'm not sure. But anyhow, we saw that about that age, and they were commanded, remember, Daniel's friends were commanded to bow down and worship that idol, that image of gold that had been set up. And what we learned was culture's greatest strategy is always to co-opt your worship. Worship is that thing that you do for what you value most, what you aspire to most, what you want to spend your time, your money, your energy on. That's what you're worshiping. And culture always wants to co-opt your worship so that you won't worship God, but rather you'll worship the things it wants you to worship. However, if we stand firm and stand up for Jesus, we said Jesus shows up for us, and we can inspire and impact other people. Well, today we come to chapter 4. Chapter 4 I've called the Mindset Challenge, okay? And this is going to be thick. It's going to be thorough, but stick with me, please. In Daniel's day, and I believe in our day, I would put it this way. Culture's greatest project is to change the way you think, okay? Not just the way you think about yourself or think about God, but it wants to change the way you think about everything. Culture is always out to control the way you think in order to get you to believe a lie, and that lie is you don't matter to God. Instead, all you need is you. Life's all about you. That's what you need to believe. You just need to believe life's all about you because God doesn't care about you. So make life all about you. Well, chapter 4 of Daniel is God's playbook for how to face that challenge. By this point, now he's in his 50s. Okay, anybody willing to admit you're in your 50s? Close. Okay, back here. This is the 50. This is the one who keeps throwing people under the bus. No, it's her son that throws her under the bus. That's right. Okay, she's earned every year of her 50, and that comment plays really well into this whole lesson, thank you, because it's insane. Anyhow, what I want to do is we're going to begin at the end of the chapter. Here's real quick. We're going to begin at the end of the chapter with the result of the mindset that we find here of culture. I'm going to show you how that mindset has been around since the beginning of time and is explained throughout the Bible. And then we're going to rewind to the beginning of chapter 4 in Daniel and look at where that mindset leads and how to respond to it. So buckle up. I traveled over 6,000 miles Friday into Saturday. We're going to do about the same this morning, so buckle up. Here's what we do. End of chapter 4. Ready? Chapter 4, verse 28. All this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. So this is something that happened to the king. All this, we'll talk about that in a minute. But it says 12 months later, all this happened. As the king was walking on the roof of his royal palace of Babylon, he said, "Is this not the great Babylon that I have built?" Okay, right there is where we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the mindset of Babylon. And the case I want to make for you is that the Babylonian mindset was around long before Babylonia was around. It was a mentality before it was a locality. Did you catch that? The Babylon mindset was a mentality long before Babylon was a locality. And it's based on a lie. That mentality is based on a lie, the lie that the devil's been telling people since the very beginning of time, but it is a mentality, catch this, that leads to insanity. That's what I want you to catch this. There's a mindset, there's a mentality that this culture wants to foist upon us, but if we believe it, it leads to insanity. Okay, that's the big idea. The Babylonian mentality of our culture, of the culture of Babylon at that time, leads to insanity, and I believe in ours as well. Okay, so let me show you that mentality as it appears in the Bible. Okay, because it appears right at the very beginning. Remember the Garden of Eden? Remember the Garden of Eden, the first thing that the devil did when he showed up? He tried to question God in their minds, in Adam and Eve's minds. Get them to question God. Did God really say to you? And basically what the devil wants you to believe, catch this, the devil wants you to believe what I'm calling the Babylonian mentality. And that mentality is this: God is not for you. God's actually against you. He just wants to ruin all your fun. God is not for you, so you need to be all about you. That's the mentality here. God's not for you, so you need to be all about you. That's it. And believing that mentality is what led to the first sin. That led to Adam and Eve sinning and rejecting God and saying, no, we're going to define right and wrong for ourselves. And we're going to define our own future. So because it's about us. Life is all about us because we don't matter. You don't really care. Well, by the time you get just a few chapters later, Genesis 11, that lie and that mentality has completely permeated culture, such that we're told that the people even decided they were going to try to build a tower to get to heaven itself. Anybody remember that tower? It said they wanted to get to heaven. Catch this. Can you imagine a people who want to get to heaven, as it were, on their own terms and do it their own way? And the reason we're told they wanted to do that was because they wanted to make a name for themselves. Because after all, life is all about me. Anybody remember what that tower was called, what that place was called? It was called, what was it? Babel. Remember that? The Tower of Babel. How many remember ever reading about the Tower of Babel? Let me see your hands. Okay, so most of you heard about it. Well, what you need to know is the term Babel, from which we get Babylon. That's where we get the word. That's where we get the name of this country. The term Babel means to be sown in confusion. That's what it says in Genesis 11:9. Confusion. That's what Babel is all about. And that just remember that confusion, because every time people follow the Babylonian mentality, the Babylonian lie, that lie that you need to be all about you, got to be all about you. When you follow that lie, the result's always confusion. You have all this disruption, all this confusion going on inside of people who believe in that. And I know, anybody besides me see that in our culture? That confusion, that craziness, as it were. And if there's one word that could describe our culture right now, it's confused. It's like, I remember one pastor saying, it's like people have lost their minds. Anybody ever think that? It's like, what happened in the last day? It's like people have lost their minds. By the way, research shows that more money is being spent right now than ever before on mental health issues. Did you know that? Coping with this craziness, medicating the confusion. People are feeling more emotional pain, more depression, more anxiety than ever before. Why? I think it's because they have bought into the Babylonian lie, the mentality. God is not for you, so you're going to have to be all about yourself. Life's got to be all about you. And that mentality leads to insanity. Okay, that's what we saw in Genesis. Let me show you I showed it at the beginning of the Bible. Let me take you all the way to the end of the Bible where Babylon is mentioned again. The Babylonian mentality is mentioned again. Remember the book of Revelation? Remember, you ever wonder if God's ever going to do anything about the mess in this world? Well, the book of Revelation tells you, yes, he is. He is, and Revelation contains not just his promise that he will, but it tells you how he's going to do it. Now, if you were with us back July, when we went through the book of Revelation and the events that will take place, you might remember that one of those events that God promises is going to happen at the end of time is that there's going to be this great judgment. And according to the record, Jesus comes back, defeats all of the enemies of God. And then he holds them to account, and there's judgment on those enemies. And Revelation 17:5 describes the scene when one of the worst of those enemies is called to account. It says, the name written on her forehead, the one called to be judged right now, the worst enemy of God, the name written there is Babylon. You see it? And some really nice words. The great mother of all prostitutes and the abomination of the earth. Wow, this is a pretty serious enemy. Babylon. Again, not just a location. Not just a locality, but also a mentality based on a lie. And God's going to judge it. Okay, so I showed it at the beginning of the Bible, showed you the end of the Bible, take you right to the middle of the Bible, Isaiah, near the middle of the Bible. Book of Isaiah, Isaiah chapter 47. If you have a printed Bible, or if you look at yours, it's going to show at the top of this paragraph I'm about to show you, the judgment of Babylon. It's talking about Babylon again, okay? And here's what we read in verse 8. Now listen, you lover of pleasure. That's Babylon. In other words, those who operate by this mentality, they're all about whatever feels good, go for it. The technical term for that, folks, is hedonism. Okay, going to act like you're in my college class right now. The term for that is hedonism. I live by my feelings and for my pleasure. It's all about me, so I live for my feelings, for my pleasure. That's this mentality. Keep reading. Notice the description of this Babylon mentality. You're lounging in your security, saying to yourself, I am, and there is none beside me. You want to know what the technical word for that is? Narcissism. Okay? I'm all that matters. Life is all about me. In fact, you know what I need to do here? Here we go. Another one. How about another one? Because life is all about me. Okay? That was stupid to do, Russell. Anyhow, keep reading. Keep reading. You've trusted in your own wickedness and have said, nobody sees me. Your wisdom and knowledge misleads you when you say to yourself, I am and there's none besides me. Okay, do you see the delusion going on here? I'm the only one who gets this. And really, it's life's all about now, if you will. I mean, it's my wisdom, my knowledge. It's the right now. It's all about me, and it's all about pleasure, and it's all about now. If you want to know about life, that's what the Babylonian mentality is. Please hear this. The Babylonian mentality only leads to insanity, and that is exactly what we find in Daniel chapter 4. So remember, we started with the end of the chapter and the last words of the king, and I want you to notice two things in his words. He said, remember, is this not the great Babylon that I built up as my royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? Okay, it's the Babylonian mentality. Notice, it always elevates self. There are two things I want you to catch here. This mentality, this lie, this craziness, it always elevates self. Can you see that there? He says, I built all this for my palace. You see the self-indulgence there? That's an easier way to say hedonism. That's what it's all self-indulgence. Listen, life is all about pleasure. Just want you to know, life is all about pleasure. Does that sound like any culture that you know of? Life is all about pleasure. I put my energies, my money and everything into my next experience, my next pleasure, my next thrill. Okay? And he said, I did it by my mighty power. How's that for a little self-promotion there? Remember that delusion? Life's all about right now. Right now. And I got the power and I got the ability. Life is about me, so let's do it right now. And then it's for the glory of my majesty. How's that for some narcissism? Life's all about me. Remember the technical word for that? Life is all about me. It's all about my glory. So I need to take another selfie. I think it was Donita, I talked to you about the article I read that said that right now, this present culture is seeing a 30% rise in clinical narcissism, which is a psychosis, a mental illness in this generation. Does that scare anybody besides me? So what am I saying? I'm saying it's the Babylonian mentality that all it does is elevate self. It's all about me, it's all about pleasure, and it's all about now. Does that sound familiar to anybody? It's all about me, it's all about pleasure, and it's all about now. If you've heard that, if you sense that, if you've bought into it, please know you've bought in to the Babylonian mentality that elevates self, and catch this, the other thing it always does is it denigrates God. Did you notice it? He didn't say anything about God. It was all about him, nothing about God. And that's the big issue in chapter 4 of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar had elevated himself and denigrated God, moved God right out of the picture. His Babylonian mentality is God is not for you. He's, you know what? So you need to be all about you. Make life all about you. Make it all about your pleasures. Make it all about right now. But that mentality, my point was, that mentality only leads to insanity, which is the story of Daniel chapter 4. How this king pursued that mentality and he lost his mind over it. That's what happens. Let me just kind of quickly tell you what happens in the whole thing. It begins, you back up the beginning of the chapter, back up the beginning, and you're going to find that it's actually a copy of a letter that the king of Babylon wrote to his people. So he's King Nebuchadnezzar to the great nations and so forth. It's a letter that he's writing. And here's how that letter begins. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace, contented and prosperous. And right there is the reason so many of us get in so much trouble. It's because we're so focused on content and prosperity. We forget that we only have it because we have God. And in fact, some of us only follow God when we're such a mess that we don't have the contentment and prosperity. There's a cycle. Have you ever seen a cycle play out in anybody's life? You get in a mess. You have trouble. What do? You call, God, help me. What does God do? He loves you enough to come help you. God helps you, and what do? You get content. You start focusing on the other things, and you get in trouble. God, help me, I'm in trouble. God says, I love you, I'll help you. But then you get content because you're focusing on yourself again, and then you get in trouble. God, is anybody else besides Russell ever played out that cycle in your life? Okay? Is that not the definition of crazy? We keep getting in that mess? Okay? The king was in that mess. That was his life. It was happening for him. That was King Nebuchadnezzar. But we're told he had a dream that made him afraid. So he's just been going along, and all of a sudden he has this dream that makes him afraid. Basically, the dream was he saw this tree. This tree grows up. It's lush. It's big. It covers everybody, protects everybody. But then the tree, boom, gets cut down. And there's only a stump that's left. Now, the king had hoped that stump and that tree was his enemies, and God was going to cut them all down. So he calls in all of his advisors to make sure that, hey, guys, I need you to tell me what this dream means. And they all say, we don't know again. We don't know, king. We tried this before. Remember chapter 2? You tried this before, and we didn't know. And so they say, but Daniel did. So why don't you get Daniel back in here and let him take you? Let's throw Daniel under the bus. Let's bring him in here. Daniel comes in. Daniel, tell me. He said, don't forget, king, I told you I can't interpret dreams. God can. So let's ask him. And so Daniel begins to tell the king what the dream means. He says, you know what? The dream is about you, king. It's trying to tell you something really important of what's going to happen to you. Daniel says, you're going to be driven away from people, and you're going to live with the wild animals. You're going to eat grass like the ox and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times are going to pass until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. The command to leave that stump, the tree with its roots, means your kingdom will be restored to you. When? When you acknowledge that heaven rules. So you're the tree, Daniel saying. You get it? You get it, king? You're the tree. You're going to be cut down because of all this self-elevating, God-denigrating way you've been living. You're going to get cut down. But God's going to leave a stump because he's a merciful God. He's a merciful God, and he's going to allow you to come back if you will turn to him. God will restore you when you acknowledge that heaven rules. When you acknowledge and recognize that God really is the one in control here, not you. That life is not all about you. It's not all about your pleasure, and it's not all about right now. God is merciful, and he'll allow you to come back. He'll allow you to be restored. Isn't it great to know we got a God like that? Anybody glad we got a God like that? Well, Daniel 4 then goes on to explain that all these things happen just like Daniel said. Okay? All these things happened to the king 12 months later. God had warned him through Daniel about this mentality that you're pursuing, king, will only lead to insanity, but he didn't listen. Man. You ever know anybody? You say, look, it's not gonna end well, and they just don't listen. They keep doing it. Okay. Do I need to start pointing? No. Okay. You get the point. He didn't listen, so a year later, we're told he just keep going on. A year later, he's walking on his palace of his roof, and here's what we're told. He looks around and he says to himself, is this not the great Babylon that I have built as my royal residence? By my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty. There's that mentality, remember? Life's all about me. It's all about pleasure. It's all about now. But we're told that even as the words were on his lips, a voice came from heaven. This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You're going to be driven from your people and will live with the wild animals. You're going to eat grass like an ox. 7 times will pass for you until they acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms and on earth and gives them to whoever he wishes. And immediately what had been said about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. It happened. He was drawn away from the people. He ate grass like the ox. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle. I wouldn't mind having hair anyhow. No. And his nails were like claws of a bird. Ooh, that's just kind of scary. Now, some scholars say, by the way, that this is metaphorical. It's just trying to describe the insanity that the king faced. Okay. Others say this is literal. This is what exactly happened to him. But in either case, the poor boy is not in a good place. Understand that? And neither is anybody who walks away from God and follows the mentality of a culture that says it's all about you, it's all about pleasure, and it's all about now. It won't work out well. And I don't need to get in your face to convince you of that. Just go try it. Life will convince you of it. Anybody besides me can testify and say, I know because I tried and it did not turn out well. Anybody say, okay, there's quite a few. And if you don't believe it yet, just look around. It did not turn out well. It doesn't. So many of us, it only leads to confusion and it leads to insanity. And if you find yourself feeling confused these days, if you find something, this is crazy, this is so crazy, I want you to know, that's what happens when you live in a Babylonian culture and you give in to the mentality of that culture, that it's all about you, it's all about your pleasure, and it's all about now. When you do, it's just going to lead to that mess. Now, the king literally went insane. He went nuts. But that wasn't the end of the story. Notice verse 34. At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes towards heaven, and my sanity was restored. And I believe that's what everybody wants. We want our sanity back. Well, don't miss what Nebuchadnezzar had to do to get his sanity back. That's where I want to focus for the few minutes I've got left. He said, then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. Who lives forever. It's not all about now. Him, not me, him, okay? His dominion's an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, hey, what have you done here? See, Nebuchadnezzar finally got it. And not only was his sanity restored, don't miss the fact, his life was restored too. Verse 36, at that same time that my sanity was restored, my honor and splendor was returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and nobles, they started seeking me out again. And I was restored to my throne. Okay? It is always God's desire. Please catch this. It is always God's desire to bless you in life. To bless you in life. Nebuchadnezzar got to discover that when he made some decisions that dealt with the insanity of the mentality he'd been following. He ends his letter, his final, with a little bit of wisdom. I call it the mentality that restores your sanity. He ends his whole thing in verse 37 with a statement of wisdom about the mentality that can restore this insanity. And so what I want to do, just real quickly, is show you 3 decisions he made that dealt with the insanity around him. 3 decisions you can make if you'd like to do something about the craziness in which we're living right now. Notice, verse 37. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, I praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven. It's not all about me. Instead, I look up submissively to God. That's the decision. That's the first decision he made, to look up submissively to God. Don't miss the fact he called God the King of heaven. This is a king calling God the King of heaven. See, our culture struggles with the idea of being a king because we live in a democracy where everybody gets a vote, everybody gets to decide what should happen. And personally, with a country, I am so glad I live in a democracy. But guess what? This universe in which we live, don't miss this, it's not a democracy. This universe in which we live is a kingdom where God is king. And he doesn't ask you before he decides things. And you don't get a vote. And I don't get a vote. He's the king. And he does what is best. And he does what he wills. He is the king. But here's, oh God, help me get this through. What it means to submit to here's why I want you to submit to the king. And why you don't. People don't submit to God as king because they believe if I submit to him as king, he's going to make me like a peasant. No. When I submit to him as king, he makes me part of the royal family. And that's a big difference, isn't it? That's what he wants you to see. David saw it. In Psalm 145, he said, I'll exalt you, my God, the King. I'll praise your name forever and ever. David was an actual king, but he knew that God was actually his king. That meant that everything in his kingdom, David's kingdom, belonged actually to God. David just got to use it. I get to use it, but it all belongs to God. I get to use it because I'm a part of God's royal family. Isn't that wonderful? I get to use this, but it belongs to God. See, David understood something I see so many other people don't understand. Example. People who, I don't know, this offering thing, this tithing thing, well, yeah. David understood, listen, the tithe is God's. You're not giving something to God. You're returning it to the rightful owner. He just gets you to let you live off the rest of it. And I am so thankful for that. because I like air conditioning or heat, whichever the case may be, which I lived all last week without, thank you. They don't have any in their buildings, any heat or any air conditioning. I kid you not. But I'm so glad that God lets me live on the 90% so I can do things like that. You're missing it. I just thought that would help, but it's not. David understood it all belongs. Some of you, I love you, but I watch you struggle with this. I watch you struggle with it. I give back to God what belongs to Him. Have you figured that out yet? You mean I got to give God 10% of what I make? No, you return to God what belongs to Him. He lets you live off the 90%. That's a pretty good deal. But see, we won't see it that way, do we? Why is that? Because we bought into the Babylonian mentality that it's all about you, and it's all about your pleasure, and it's all about now. That's insanity. But you get your sanity back when you go, wait a minute. I'm going to submit to you as my king. I'm going to submit to you as my king. That was the first decision Nebuchadnezzar made. Let me show you the second one. He said, the second one is this. Let me just go ahead and put it this way. I will follow God obediently. I'm just going to trust Him and follow Him. I'm just going to follow Him. I'm just going to do what you say. I'm going to obey you because I trust you. Remember what he says? Because everything He does is right and all His ways are just. Okay? You get your sanity back when you acknowledge that God's ways are right and God's ways are just. God's ways are right and God's ways are just. Well, how do I understand your ways, God? Listen to me. God's ways are found in God's Word. If you want to know what God's ways are, read His Word. Because God's ways are found in His Word. The psalmist said that when he wrote, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Psalm 119, that psalm, by the way, is the longest one in the Bible, and it's all about the Word being where we find God's ways and God's will that shows us how to live. And when we follow those ways, we get our sanity back. And yet I hear people say all the time about the Bible, well, I don't know that I agree. I don't know if I agree with that. And it's like, personally, I think that's hilarious because it doesn't matter whether you agree with it or not. It doesn't change its reality. God said it, that settles it. I've heard others say, but I don't understand it. I just don't understand it. It's kind of like a kid says, I don't understand why I can't have the 12th serving of chocolate. And we're a parent going, because we know that will not turn out well for you. No, that's going to be bad. And we're going to be up all night long. And every parent who's had that happen said, right? Listen, I follow God's ways as found in His Word because they work, not because I understand them. Guys, I don't understand digestion. I just don't figure out, I can't understand how it works, but I'm still going to eat. Can you follow that? If you can, then you trust God's ways. Trust His ways. I've heard other people, they'll go, you know what, though? You know what, you keep doing this past, but I just don't want to do it. I just don't feel like doing that. I just don't feel, hey, last thing I want to do is follow my feelings. If anything these months have taught me is that don't trust your feelings because they're fickle and they'll deceive you. Don't trust your feelings. Instead, follow God. He's my king, so whatever He tells me to do, I'm going to trust Him and do it. And if you want your sanity back, follow His ways. Follow His ways, okay? Acknowledge Him as king. Follow His ways. And then the third thing, walk humbly. Walk humbly. Remember what Nebuchadnezzar said. Let's put it all back together. He said, I, Nebuchadnezzar, I now praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven. I'm going to submit to you. Because everything He does is right and just. I'm going to trust your ways. Submit to those. And those who walk in pride, He's able to humble. I get my sanity back when I decide not to make life all about me. Not to take the next selfie. It's not all about me. Oh, let's do another one. I was in church today. Aren't I good? No. We get our sanity back when we humble ourselves before God. Humility always leads to getting your sanity back. But catch this. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is thinking of yourself less. Did you catch that? Humility doesn't mean you're thinking less of yourself. Oh, that means I'm just such a terrible, oh good, I'm so bad. No. You're just thinking about yourself less. What am I going to do? What should I get? Think about yourself less. Because the promise is, humility will bring you to a life that gets your sanity back. And it's living a life that says, listen, I know it's not all about me, God. that actually it's all about you. And the thing that I've learned, oh man, let me put it down right now. If you tuned out, tune right back in. Here's what I've learned in life after living more years than I'm going to admit. Either you humble yourself or life's going to humble you. Your choice. Okay. Those of you who lived at least as long as I have or think you've lived as long as I have, is it not true that life, you're either going to humble yourself or life's going to humble you? Anybody else been there? Yeah. Just look at those of us who don't have hair or the hair is a different color, okay? It's not original. If it hadn't come out of the don't forget that. Don't go there, Russell. Don't go there. You know, some people's hair turns gray. Mine just turns loose. I don't know why. Anyhow. Just ask us. Ask us. Hey, life will humble you if you want to humble yourself. So James says, humble yourself before the Lord. He'll lift you up. Humble yourself before the Lord, and He'll lift you up. That's how you can get your sanity back. Again, I just wanted you to say, is it not true that we live in a culture that is insane? It's crazy. Why is that? Because it buys into the lie. Life's all about you. All about your pleasures and all about now. If you want your sanity back, you're the king. I'll trust your ways and walk humbly before you. During my time when I was in Brazil, one of the challenges every time I go there is language. I don't understand. I know just a few. I know enough Portuguese to get myself in trouble. You know, like you need to realize every time I go, it's a good thing I got somebody with me. Otherwise, I'd be in jail because I would get myself in trouble. I was preaching one time there, and I was trying to explain that that I'm not a very good gardener. I said I even killed a cactus, but in translation, the word cactus and cat got mixed up, and suddenly I had a congregation thinking I just said that I had murdered a cat, and they're thinking, "Who is this guy?" You know. It's always humbling to me to try to be in places like that because it can get crazy. But when I turn to God in prayer, my sanity is restored. Why is that? Because here's what I figured out. When I pray, God understands my language. Even nobody else around me does. God understands. Now, here's what I want us to do. I've asked the guys to come help me. That last song they sang, we're going to sing a little bit more again. But I want us to end with a time of prayer. And I think it's appropriate because some of us in this room right now know what it's like to feel the craziness closing in. And it's hurting. It's hurting us. It's hurting some of our loved ones. Things have gotten crazy for them. Anybody have anybody you love that it is crazy for them right now? I think, again, the best thing, when I felt, just pray. When I pray and I turn to God, He understands. And so we're going to sing this song again about if I praise Him as my King. He is the King of Kings. I'm going to praise You as my King, and I'm going to trust in Your ways and walk before You. And I just think maybe there might be somebody who just needs to talk to God before you leave. And ask God to restore some sanity to the craziness you're living with at work or at home or in the family. Or maybe you want to pray for somebody you love. I had a prayer request brought to me today about a loved one that's in bad shape right now. And I want you to remember, pray with me about that. Maybe a couple of you don't even know the details. You don't need to know the details, but you'll come and pray over that critical need right now for somebody for whom it's driving them crazy. So would you stand with me? Let's just stand. I just think as we sing this song, if anybody feels the desire to just bring your life to God and say, God, I'm going to seek You this way so that sanity can be restored in my life, my world, my family, for my loved one, even in a culture like this. If you want to join me in prayer, why don't you do it as we sing?
In the darkness we were waiting, without hope, without light, till from heaven You came running. There was mercy in Your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt.
Lord, we do want to praise you. Somehow in this moment, we want to come and bow humbly before you and say, you're the King. God, I may not understand it all, I may not like it all, but I do know this, you're the King and I can trust you. And I'm going to choose to do that today. I'm going to humble myself before you in prayer and say, God, return sanity to these crazy times in which I'm living and what I'm facing. And Lord, I just believe that there's more than a few people in this room who are facing some things that are just nuts, Lord. And they need you to bring that sanity back. And so this morning we're just humbly saying it, Lord, I'm choosing you. I submit to you as the King. You're in control, not me. This is all about you and not about me. God, I'm choosing you, and I'm going to trust you. I may not understand it, but I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to humble myself before you. And God, as we do that, my prayer is that you're just going to let your Spirit descend with a peace that restores that sanity, that restores that confidence, that restores that sense of well-being. God, would you just do that this morning? And especially for those, God, some of us are praying for somebody we love. And it's bad, it's crazy. But God, we're praying over them, that you will restore peace to their mind, that you restore peace to their heart, that you will take that discouragement, that you'll take that depression, that you'll take that uncertainty, that you'll take that anger, that you'll take that anxiety that is just driving them crazy, God, and that you will bring your grace to bear in their lives. Let them know that when they look to you, there's a way to get their sanity back and that they can have a peace with you. So God, we're praying over them. And if you want to speak words through us, then do it. But God, let us have that chance. Let us have that opportunity, because we know we're living in a time and in a culture that is absolutely crazy. But we hear this morning and we believe this morning there's a way to live sane in an insane world. And we're making those choices today. So God, I pray your peace, and I pray your well-being, and I pray your goodness, and I pray your strength over every person in this place and every person listening online. May they know today, as they choose these things that the king of Babylon did, they can get their sanity back and find a way to walk in life in strength and in peace. Do it this day, I ask, in Jesus' name. Amen. So tell you what, let's sing that last verse of that song into the chorus. The moment that he rose. Let's sing it together.
Church of Christ was born, and the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not faint. By his blood and in his name, in his freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me.
So lift your voices as a final praise.
Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Praise forever to the King of Kings.
Now may the peace of the King and the power of the King and the authority of the King go with you today, because you are a part of the royal family. Amen. Believe it and go in strength, I pray. You're dismissed. Amen.
Amen.